Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit for our weekend book review, where we do a deep dive into a listener's source material.
And today we're tackling Wittgenstein's Tractatus, a critical guide.
Yeah, a guide is definitely needed for this one, I think.
It can be a little dense.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at this Cambridge University Press book, Wittgenstein's Tractatus, a critical guide.
A collection of essays from various contemporary scholars.
Multiple perspectives on this philosophical masterpiece.
Absolutely. And this deep dive will take you through each chapter, highlighting those key interpretations and debates surrounding the Tractatus.
We'll uncover what makes this work so influential, so controversial, and frankly, a bit of a mind bender.
Yeah, a little bit.
So imagine you crack open the Tractatus expecting, some profound philosophical wisdom. And Wittgenstein's like, psych, this is all nonsensical.
Right.
What's going on here?
Yeah, what is he doing?
That's the mystery. Chapter 1, Wittgenstein's Ladder. The goal of the Tractatus tries to unravel.
Is he messing with us? Is there a method to his madness?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so the chapter dives into this debate about whether Wittgenstein intended the Tractatus as a set of philosophical doctrines or more as a philosophical self-help guide.
I like that.
To kind of free us from traditional thinking.
Freeing us from the traps of thought.
Yeah, like, here's a ladder, climb up it, and then kick the ladder away. You won't need it anymore.
Oh, that's a really nice way to put it.
And the role of anyone trying to explain the Tractatus, including us right now in this deep dive, is to guide you up that ladder.
Up the ladder.
But not dwell on the final destination.
Right.
So it's about illuminating the path, the process of understanding, rather than just like, here's the answer.
That's pretty radical to write a whole book, and the end result is that the book is nonsensical.
It is, but that's Wittgenstein.
Yeah.
And this idea of the limits of language, what can be said and what can only be shown.
Right.
It's central to this whole project.
To his whole project.
Yeah.
Which brings us nicely to chapter 2, Saying and Showing and the Cardinal Problem of Philosophy.
Yes.
This chapter kicks off with a letter that Wittgenstein wrote to Bertrand Russell, where he outlines what he calls the cardinal problem of philosophy.
This problem revolves around the idea that some things can be clearly stated, while others can only be demonstrated or hinted at indirectly.
Right.
And this leads to that famous distinction between saying and showing in Wittgenstein's work.
Okay, and the million-dollar question is, what did he really mean by showing?
Ooh.
It's like this philosophical riddle that scholars are still debating.
They are. Some interpreters think it points to a mystical realm beyond language,
Okay.
a kind of spiritual truth that words just can't quite capture.
Right.
Others see it as more about the inherent limitations of any system of representation. Like a map can never perfectly capture the territory it's trying to represent.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like trying to explain the color red to someone who's been blind since birth.
I was going to say,
You can use words,
you can use words, but you can't actually show them.
but they'll never truly grasp that experience. And so that highlights that some things can only be grasped through direct experience, not through language.
Yes.
Which brings us to the example of dual relationality in the chapter.
Okay, dual relationality. I'll admit this one tripped me up a bit.
It's a heady concept.
It's a little, hold on, I need to get my philosophy degree out.
We can break it down.
Okay.
Imagine language as a mirror reflecting reality.
Okay.
So you have a sentence, the cat sat on the mat.
Right.
It's not just these random words strung together. It's like this little model
A mini model.
of that situation. There's a cat piece, a mat piece, and they're connected in a sitting way.
I see.
It's not just labeling things, but capturing the relationship between them.
So the relation between them.
And this mirroring, this dual relationality, is how language makes sense of the world according to Wittgenstein.
Okay, so language is like a Lego set for building thoughts.
Exactly. That's
Cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
And this mirroring is crucial for understanding how language can actually depict reality.
Depict reality.
But Wittgenstein didn't stop there. He tackled the process of analyzing language itself.
Okay.
And that's what Chapter 3, Clarification and Analysis in the Tractatus, is all about.
Okay, so after this mind-bending link between language and reality, now he's going into the nuts and bolts of how we use language to think.
Yes.
Okay.
And it contrasts two major approaches to understanding language. One associated with Gottlob Frege. He champions a logically perfect language,
Okay.
free from all the ambiguities of everyday speech.
So like a special language for robots.
Yes, where every word has a precise meaning and there's no room for misunderstanding.
Got it.
And the other approach, favored by Bertrand Russell, focuses on analyzing our ordinary language to uncover its hidden logical structure.
So instead of inventing a new language, it's like cleaning up a messy room and finding treasure you didn't know was there.
Yes. Exactly.
I like that.
And Wittgenstein sides with Russell on this one.
In Tractatus,
He believed that philosophical clarification doesn't require us to create a whole new language. It's about revealing the logical relationships that are already present.
present in our everyday language.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. It's about finding clarity within the messiness, not trying to create an artificial order.
Absolutely. It's about appreciating the richness and complexity of language, even with its imperfections.
I like that a lot. Okay, so the journey doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
Wittgenstein throws us a curveball in Chapter 4, The Fishtail. A transcendental reading of the Tractatus.
Ooh, yes.
A little mysterious.
It's centered around an analogy to the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, The Gold Children.
Okay, so what's a fairy tale doing in a philosophy book? He's switching genres.
It's a bold move.
It is a bold move.
But he uses it to illustrate the relationship between language and the world, suggesting they share a deep underlying unity, almost like two sides of the same coin.
Okay, so the fairy tale, it's about this magical fish that connects everything.
Exactly. And that has led some scholars to argue for a transcendental idealist interpretation of the Tractatus.
Okay, I was about to ask, what is transcendental idealism?
Okay, it's a big idea, but we can unpack it. In a nutshell, transcendental idealism suggests that the world as we experience it is shaped by our minds,
Okay.
by the structure of our perceptions and our understanding. It's not that the world outside our minds doesn't exist, but we can only access it through this lens of our own cognitive framework.
So we're all wearing these special glasses.
Yes.
That filter reality and we can't take them off.
And we can never take them off to see the world as it truly is.
Wow.
So in this interpretation, the fish in the fairy tale represents kind of this metaphysical subject,
Okay.
something beyond the world of experience that grounds the unity of language and reality.
Okay.
It's a controversial interpretation, but it's definitely fascinating.
So the fish is like the ultimate puppet master,
Yes.
making sure the language puppet and the world puppet are always dancing in sync.
That is a great image. And then the chapter throws another curveball by bringing music into the picture.
Wait, music. Now we're really going down the rabbit hole.
It might seem like a strange connection, but the idea is that, like, music, logical, and mathematical propositions have a kind of formal structure that
Yeah.
reflects the structure of reality. Even though they don't refer to specific objects or events in the world, they still capture something about the way things are.
So music's like a secret code.
It's like this hidden language that unlocks the logical structure of the universe.
Okay. I'm not sure I entirely get it, but it sounds cool.
It's a complex idea, but it highlights Wittgenstein's fascination with the power of formal systems to capture profound truths about reality.
Okay.
And he's not saying logic and math are the only ways to understand the world,
Okay.
but he's pointing out that they have their own unique and powerful ways of representing reality.
So it's like different maps for different purposes.
Exactly.
You know, a road map versus a geological map.
A fantastic analogy. And it underscores the importance of considering different perspectives and different approaches when we're trying to understand the world.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. But let's not get too carried away with metaphors.
Right.
We've got to get back to the book.
Yes, we do.
Chapter 5. Frege's conception of truth and Wittgenstein's showing distinction brings us back to the core issues of language and truth.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so after the detour into fairy tales and music, we're back to wrestling with the big questions like, what does it even mean for something to be true?
Exactly. This chapter dives into Wittgenstein's view of the word true and how it relates to the act of assertion.
Okay.
He rejects Frege's idea that propositions have this kind of pre-existing truth value, independent of whether they're actually asserted.
Oh.
For Wittgenstein, a proposition only gains meaning when it's used to make a claim about the world.
So it's not enough to just have a thought in your head. You have to actually do something with it, put it out there in the world.
Precisely. You have to do something with it. And that's where that saying showing distinction comes back into play.
Okay.
For Wittgenstein, the truth of a proposition isn't something that can be explicitly stated,
Okay.
but rather shown through its use, through the way it connects to the world.
So it's like knowing the rules of chess versus actually playing a game.
Yes. The rules are just abstract concepts until you put them into action on the board.
Yes, I love that.
And the chapter uses the example of supposition to illustrate this point.
Okay, supposition.
Yeah.
That's when you're considering something without actually committing to it.
Exactly. A little mental dress rehearsal.
Okay.
And so when we suppose something, We're entertaining a proposition without actually asserting it.
Okay.
But even in supposition, the content of that proposition is still there. It's like this thought bubble floating above your head.
Okay.
You haven't shouted it out to the world yet, but it's still there shaping your thinking.
So it's like trying on different outfits in a dressing room.
Yes.
You're not committing to wearing them, but they're influencing your sense of style.
I love that.
Okay.
And this highlights the idea that language has these implicit dimensions.
Yeah.
Layers of meaning that go beyond what's explicitly said.
Interesting.
But all this talk about truth and language inevitably leads to the question of self.
Yes.
Where do I fit into all of this?
Where do I fit in?
And that's where Chapter 6, Solipsism in the Tractatus, takes center stage.
Solipsism. That's the idea that only my own mind is real.
Exactly. The ultimate philosophical Edo trip.
Yes.
And so the chapter explores how it relates to Wittgenstein's view of language and the self.
Okay.
Given his focus on the limits of language, you might think he would be sympathetic to solipsism.
Right, because language is ultimately private.
If language shapes my world,
Right.
and language is ultimately private, doesn't that mean my world is all there is?
Yeah, like being trapped in a VR simulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where everything you experience is just a projection of your own mind.
But he doesn't fully embrace solipsism.
Surprisingly, no. He acknowledges its allure, but argues that this private-public distinction isn't actually the core issue.
Okay, hold on. How can that not be relevant? That seems so central to solipsism.
That's a great question.
It's about my thoughts and experiences.
Remember, Wittgenstein's primary focus is on the structure of language.
Okay.
And its ability to represent reality. The key question is how language works. How does it manage to depict the world, regardless of whether that world is shared or private?
I see.
Think of it like this. A map can accurately represent a territory regardless of whether anyone has ever seen that territory.
Okay.
Or even believes it exists.
Right, so the map's accuracy doesn't depend on how many people are using it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The focus is on the map's ability to represent reality,
Represent reality.
not its social or interpersonal implications.
Okay, so, which brings us to Chapter 7, the Tractatus and the First Person.
Here we go.
Here we finally delve into the role of the I
Yeah.
in Wittgenstein's philosophy.
Been circling around it.
Yes, we've been circling around the self, and now we're finally confronting it head on.
Yeah, and this chapter explores the emergence of the philosophical I in the Tractatus,
Okay.
contrasting it with his earlier writings where this concept wasn't as prominent.
Okay.
It also delves into the complexities of how we analyze judgments and beliefs.
Okay.
And one of the key points is this difference between his early notes and the Tractatus.
Okay.
It's almost as if his thinking evolved as he was writing.
So he's having a conversation with himself, challenging his own assumptions as he goes along.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the early notes, he focuses on propositions as this basic unit of meaning.
Okay.
But in the Tractatus, he shifts his attention to the act of judging.
Okay.
He realizes that a proposition only gains meaning when it's used to make a claim about the world.
I see.
And this brings in the role of the judging subject,
The judging subject.
the I who's doing the judging.
So it's not just that there's a proposition floating out there. There's a subject, an I, that is taking ownership.
Taking ownership.
Yeah, of that proposition in the act of judging.
It's like the difference between a book on the shelf and someone actually reading and interpreting it.
Yes, I love that. Okay.
But this journey through the Tractatus takes another unexpected turn
Right.
with Chapter 8, Arithmetic, in the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus.
From the I to numbers.
Get ready for some number crunching.
After all this talk about language and truth and the self, now we're going into the world of mathematics.
Yeah, Wittgenstein liked to keep us on our toes.
He did.
But this isn't a random detour. This chapter explores Wittgenstein's attempt to give a logical foundation to arithmetic,
Okay.
something that had been a major project for philosophers like Frege and Russell before him.
So he's trying to figure out what numbers really are, where they come from.
What they are, where they come from, how they relate to the world.
Okay.
And he rejects the traditional logicist approach,
Okay.
championed by Frege and Russell, which
Yeah.
tried to define numbers in terms of sets or classes.
Okay.
Instead, he proposes this more operation-based approach, defining numbers as the result of these repeated applications of an operation.
Okay.
It's less about what numbers are and more about what we do with them, how we construct them through these operations.
So it's less about saying 3 is a quantity, but it's the result of +1 3 times.
Yes, exactly. It's the process, the act of counting.
It's about the process, not the abstract concept.
Yes. Think of it like building a tower out of blocks.
Okay.
Each block represents an operation, and by stacking them in a sequence, you create the different numbers.
Okay, I like that a lot. But It sounds like he laid the foundation but didn't quite finish the house.
Yes, he didn't fully address this principle of mathematical induction,
Okay.
which is crucial for proving theorems about all natural numbers.
Okay.
And Wittgenstein later acknowledges the limitations of his early views on math,
Okay.
even though he never fully abandoned the topic. But let's shift gears again to Chapter 9, Normal Connections and the Law of Causality.
Okay.
This one takes us into the realm of science.
From numbers to science, Wittgenstein really covers a lot of ground.
He does.
So this one sounds like it's about how we understand the relationship between events.
You got it.
Yeah.
This chapter delves into his discussion of causality, drawing heavily on the ideas of Heinrich Hertz,
Okay.
who was a physicist and philosopher. He argued for what he called normal connections in nature,
Okay.
meaning that events are connected in this lawful and predictable way.
Okay.
The universe isn't just a random jumble of happenings, but rather that there's this underlying order, a set of rules governing how things unfold.
So there's a reason why the ball falls down when I drop it not up.
Exactly.
There's a predictable pattern.
Yes.
Okay.
And Wittgenstein uses this idea to explore the limits of what we can think and say about the world.
Okay.
He argues that we can only conceive of events as being causally connected if they conform to these normal connections.
Okay.
Anything outside of this framework is literally unthinkable.
So we can only imagine a game of chess if we follow the rules. If someone just starts moving the pieces randomly, it's not chess anymore.
Exactly. Our minds are wired to see patterns,
Wired to see patterns.
and those patterns are shaped by the normal connections of the world.
So our very understanding of the world is constrained by these structures and regularities?
It is.
Okay.
Without them, experience would just be utter chaos.
Like trying to read a book where the words keep changing?
Yes. You could never make sense of the story.
Okay, so these normal connections are crucial
They-
for making sense of the world.
Absolutely.
Even with all this talk about language and logic and science, Wittgenstein doesn't shy away from ethics.
No, he doesn't.
Chapter 10, the ethical dimension of the Tractatus.
This one surprised me.
This one really threw me for a loop. I was not expecting ethics in this book.
I know, but it speaks to the depth and breadth of his thinking.
Yeah.
He doesn't offer like a systematic ethical theory.
No.
He explores the relationship between ethics and language, arguing that ethics belongs to a realm that can't be fully captured by words. It can only be shown or demonstrated indirectly.
Okay.
You know, it's like trying to describe a color to someone who's been blind since birth.
You can't do it.
Words just don't do justice.
So ethics is more about a way of being in the world, a way of relating to others and the world around us, rather than a set of rules.
Exactly.
Like you can't learn to ride a bike by just reading a physics book. You
Exactly.
have to actually do it.
You got to get on the bike and feel the balance and the movement and the wind in your hair.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings us to the final chapter of our journey today.
Okay.
Chapter 11, the Tractatus on Free Will.
Here we go.
This one tackles the classic philosophical problem
The big one.
of the relationship between our choices and the deterministic laws of nature.
Are we really free or are our actions predetermined?
Yeah, it's a question that has haunted philosophers for centuries.
It has.
And it seems like Wittgenstein's offering his own unique perspective.
He is. And this chapter explores how he grapples with the concept of will within this framework of the Tractatus.
Okay.
One of the key takeaways is that he rejects the idea that there's this separate metaphysical will that somehow acts upon the world.
Okay.
For him, the will isn't this mysterious force
Right.
that exists independently of our actions.
It's expressed through our choices and our behaviors.
Exactly. So it's not about having free will in some grand metaphysical sense,
Right.
but about recognizing the choices we make and the responsibility we have for those choices within the context of our lives.
So it's not about free will, but recognizing that we make choices and those have consequences.
Exactly.
So it's like saying that even if we're all characters in a play, we still have the freedom to choose how we play our roles.
That's a brilliant analogy that highlights that agency and responsibility are still meaningful concepts.
Even if we don't have complete control over the script,
Even if we don't.
our choices matter. We have the power to make a difference.
You do.
Even within the constraints of our circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a fitting note to end on as we conclude our deep dive into the Tractatus. But before we wrap things up completely,
Yes.
let's take a moment to acknowledge the brilliant minds that helped illuminate this work.
Yes, absolutely.
This deep dive wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the work of these scholars who contributed to Wittgenstein's Tractatus. a critical guide.
Yeah, it's like having a whole team of Wittgenstein experts guiding us through this philosophical labyrinth.
Exactly. Each offering their unique insights.
Yeah, and that's what makes this book so valuable. It's not just one person's take on the Tractatus.
Right. It's like a chorus of voices.
Yeah.
Helping us to grasp these nuances and complexities.
Yeah, and it makes it a lot less intimidating, too, because you're not just relying on one person's interpretation.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like exploring a vast and mysterious landscape with a group of guides.
Right.
Each guide points out different features and different paths,
Different ways of seeing the terrain.
different ways of seeing it.
So instead of feeling lost, we have these navigators helping us to find our way and appreciate the richness of the journey.
And each chapter goes deeper into these specific aspects of the Tractatus, encouraging you to keep exploring.
Like they're giving us the keys to the kingdom.
Yes, go forth and explore.
Exactly.
The world of the Tractatus is yours.
And speaking of giving credit where credit is due, we have to thank Cambridge University Press for publishing this incredible book.
Absolutely.
They did a fantastic job of making this complex and often intimidating work more accessible.
They really did. They took a notoriously difficult text and made it something that we can actually engage with.
Yes.
It's a testament to their commitment to scholarship.
Yes.
And to making these complex ideas available to everybody.
So if you're feeling inspired to delve into the world of the Tractatus, this is an excellent starting point.
It is. You get that context and the guidance and the multiple perspectives you need to embark on this journey.
And adventure.
And even if you're not planning on reading the whole Tractatus, this book is still worth picking up. It offers a fascinating glimpse into the mind of one of the most influential philosophers
Of the 20th century.
Yes.
And it grapples with these timeless questions about language, logic, meaning, and the human condition.
Absolutely. It reminds us that philosophy is not just an abstract academic pursuit,
Right.
but a way of engaging with the world.
Yeah, asking those deep questions and searching for meaning.
Exactly. And that search for meaning often takes us to unexpected places.
It does.
Just like this deep dive into the Tractatus has taken us from logic and language to fairy tales, music, and even free will.
Yeah.
It's been quite a tour
It has been.
of some of the most profound ideas in Western philosophy. And hopefully it's left you with more questions than answers.
Because that's the beauty of philosophy.
It is.
It's not about finding all the answers, but learning to ask better questions.
Yes. To challenge our assumptions and expand our horizons.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we invite you to continue the exploration on your own.
Yes. Pick up this book, crack open the Tractatus.
Let the journey continue.
Don't be afraid to get lost. There are tons of scholars and enthusiasts out there grappling with these ideas.
You're not alone.
We're not alone at all. And the rewards of this intellectual adventure are well worth the effort.
And remember, this is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Wittgenstein's later work, his philosophical investigations, takes these ideas in new and fascinating directions.
It does. So if you find yourself hooked,
Keep going.
there's a whole other world waiting.
It's like discovering a secret passage in a familiar castle.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
There's always more to uncover, more to understand, and more to question.
exactly. And that's what makes the study of philosophy so endlessly rewarding.
It is.
So go forth and explore. The world of Wittgenstein and philosophy is yours for the taking. Before we wrap things up completely, I was thinking it would be good to talk a little bit more about the book itself.
Yeah, good idea.
Dive into the preface and see what they have to say about this whole project.
Yeah, they acknowledge right from the start that the Tractatus is notoriously difficult.
They're not sugarcoating it. No, they're not, which I appreciate.
It's like, look, this is Wittgenstein, buckle up.
Exactly. But they emphasize that the book aims to make it more accessible
Okay.
by bringing together all this work from leading scholars
So they're not just throwing us into the deep end. No, they're providing a guided tour
with a life preserver.
with a life preserver. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And they highlight the diversity of interpretations represented in these essays.
Right.
Emphasizing that there's no one right way to understand the Tractatus.
That's actually reassuring.
Yeah.
You don't have to be intimidated by trying to find the one right interpretation.
You don't. It's all about exploration.
Yeah.
That's what makes the Tractatus so fascinating.
It's like a puzzle box.
It is. And each essay offers a different way to unlock its secrets.
I love that analogy.
And they even mention new translations of the Tractatus are in the works,
Oh, wow.
which just shows this ongoing interest and relevance.
So it's like a living document.
It is constantly evolving as we grapple with these ideas.
So to sum up, if you're looking for a challenging but rewarding intellectual adventure,
Yes,
this is the book for you.
it is.
Wittgenstein's Tractatus. A critical guide.
Your key to unlocking those mysteries.
Yes.
Of one of the most influential philosophical works of the 20th century.
And it might even change the way you think.
It might.
About language in the world.
About everything.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
It is.
We covered a lot of ground, from the nature of language to the limits of logic and the elusive realm of ethics.
We did.
But this is just the beginning.
Yes, the beginning.
The world of philosophy is vast and endlessly fascinating, and there's always more to explore. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into Wittgenstein's Tractatus, a critical guide, be sure to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify.
For more deep dives.
And until next time, happy reading.